Doug Rink, Gilmer County resident. There's a lot I could say about the ordinance as it's drafted, but my more immediate concern is the process of how we are here today. Gilmer County residents have been given 2 weeks to review the draft, which was not released until, I believe, March 26th. And one public hearing scheduled on a Friday afternoon. Not the best time to draw a public crowd. With a county commission meeting to follow for a vote on this ordinance change, land use ordinance change. The first vote, there'll be a second one in May, but the first one is scheduled for immediately after, giving you no time to reflect on any comments you hear today. So why are we here right now? Charlie said something the other day that made me think. Is this being done to benefit one particular entity? And I have to come back and say, possibly so. Because a developer, Georgia Communities, the chosen official partner of the Gilmer Initiative for Community Housing, filed for a rezoning request weeks before the public knew what was coming. It was accepted by Mr. Smith in Planning and Zoning. The Times Courier noted this plan is coming in its March 12th edition. That's like 2 weeks before the rest of us knew what was happening. Why is that? I go back and look at history. Let's go back 2 years, May 2023. Mr. Ken Stanford, as chairman of GICH and chairman of the Gilmer Joint Development Authority, addressed Delegate City Council on plans by a developer, Georgia Communities, to build apartments on Courier Street. He received a warm welcome. He said his appearance in May was very important because Georgia Communities needed appropriate documents to submit with their applications to the Georgia Department of Community Affairs. Let's look at last year, this time, April, May. 85 UConn was a hot topic. Of course, it was an evening public hearing for a rezoning, and it drew hundreds of people. And the GICH proposal, partnership with Georgia Communities, went down in flames. It was an embarrassing thing. But here we are, April, May again. Why always April, May? Because Georgia Communities, it appears, is facing deadlines with the Department of Community Affairs. It needs certain documentation in place to move forward with a low-income housing tax credit application. I believe that is why we are seeing a rushed push to get this through right now on a Friday afternoon. This is a major change for Gilmer County. I would have loved to have been privy to some of the GICH meetings where things like this were discussed, but the public was not invited, nor were GICH meetings advertised.
This is not a GICH initiative that we're working on here.
But it stems from the GICH initiative participants, particularly Ms. Ferguson took credit for moving this agenda forward.
In your opinion?
In my opinion, she did admit it in a public work session 2 days ago. I think we need some discovery before this moves forward. I would like to know if GICH, or what role Georgia Communities has played in the timetable, and if Gilmer County officials such as Mr. Smith, Ms. Ferguson, or any of the other members of the board, the planning staff, are aware of the need for this change to take place so that Georgia Communities' application before the DCA can move to fruition.
I don't recall ever being told that there was anything of that nature that was pushing this, or any such deadlines. But let me ask you though, you're in attendance at almost every meeting. Were you not privy to the discussions that we had on this in our March meeting?
We did not get details, we did not get a draft of the ordinance until it was publicly advertised in the Times Courier.
No, we were working out what those details were gonna be. What happens is, we discuss what changes are gonna take place, and then we ask David then to formalize that. You're talking about the formalized part of it and saying you only got a couple of weeks, but what was formalized was what was discussed in the March meeting. That and some of the discussions from the work sessions. But it's not, yeah, maybe the formal document was a couple of weeks, but you know, there's been a couple of months worth of discussion going on about this, and those discussions are what generated that document. So I don't think it's fair to say you had 2 weeks to think about it.
That these discussions cite specifically a zoning density of 10 units per acre.
We discussed that, yes, and we discussed that and other possibilities, but that's what was settled on.
Well, that was what was settled on. If we really can't respond until you settle on something, and you've given us 2 weeks.
We can't respond to anything until the proposal is put forth, and, you know, we spend a couple of months trying to come up with what that proposal is going to be. And the document that you're discussing is what the end result of those couple of months worth of discussion. And you were there for those discussions. It shouldn't have been a surprise to you.
I may have missed a meeting because I am not aware of some of those discussions. And again, I have not been at every meeting. And it's difficult when you have so many meetings and special meetings and work sessions and 8 a.m. or 4 p.m. or.
It is, but recently all the meetings have been recorded and I don't know for a fact, but I think you may be able to find them on YouTube.
I'm pretty good at finding. I wish my hearing was better and we had the right mics. If we had official televised or streamed commission meetings and work sessions, it would be very advantageous to the
Well, we
citizens.
may be able to improve on that some at the new location, but for now, this is what we've got.
Now, how many of our commissioners declared a conflict of interest in moving this issue forward because of their involvement with GICH?
Well, that's something that's on the agenda for tonight. They can either declare that they do or do not have a conflict.
And again, I would, because of the peculiarity of the timetable, and that we are rushing this through.
Doug, this timetable is the exact same timetable we use for every ordinance change.
Just 2 weeks? Moving commission meetings?
Let me ask you this, you were at the work session a
Yes,
couple
sir.
days ago, right? You remember the discussion on light proliferation?
Yes, I did.
Okay. We're gonna have another discussion on that. And we're gonna ask David to put something together for us, and then we'll have a discussion on that. And we'll ask for a final version, and you'll probably get about 2 weeks to look at that. But you should have been in the process all the way down the line, and there should be nothing in that final version that's a surprise to you. You say that this is a special timetable. It takes 3 months to make an ordinance change. No matter what ordinance change you're looking to make. The process is the same for any of them. We're not doing any kind of a special timetable on this that we wouldn't do on the light ordinance, for instance, if there turns out to be one. It'll take 3 months for that to happen. And I'm guessing that once we get to the public comment part of it and get something final, we'll probably have about 2 weeks to look at that. But again, there shouldn't be any surprises in it for you.
Are you aware of any past precedent where a rezoning application was accepted and moved forward based on the presumption the land use ordinance would be changed just prior to the final vote approving that rezoning request?
No, I'm not familiar with another one.
It seems a highly unusual matter because our Planning and Zoning Commission next week is being asked to recommend approval based on an ordinance that at the time it acts next week does not exist or limits density to 4 units per acre.
David, from a legal perspective, is there a problem with that?
The board can set policies and adopt ordinances as it sees fit.
I'm talking about specifically somebody making a request for a zoning change when that is not permitted yet.
No, I mean, y'all get questions or get requests for zoning changes all the time, and that's how a good number of these versions have come into place over the years, is that there's been a request or something of that similar nature to make a change. It's a fluid document. It's not a static document. It doesn't stay in place, and that's the changes, and that's what's under consideration today. The rezoning isn't under consideration at all. It's still to be presented to the planning commission, and if there's an objection to that, at that time, that area would be a public hearing for the citizens to participate in. But for today and for tonight, is only the rezoning, the ordinance, the change in the land use district.
I think the supposition here, though, is that if that zoning wasn't available, that we should not have taken a request for the rezoning.
That's correct.
I see your point, but I don't see that anybody did anything wrong on this. No promises were made, no commitments were made. I know for myself, and I believe you're talking about the same property that we had, they requested a de-annexation. People don't understand sometimes that we don't have the authority to say, no, we can't do it. State law requires only about 3 or 4 different specifics that we could cite as a reason for turning down a request for de-annexation. None of those apply. I made a comment at that point, and maybe you were there to hear it, that, yeah, I was fine with the de-annexation because I didn't have any choice but to be fine, but that they should not assume that this meant that they were automatically going to get the zoning. Do you remember that?
Yes, I do.
So,
And I think you made a very valid point, but I would like to know, for the sake of disclosure, what brought us here today and what will bring us here next Thursday is who in Gilmore County told Georgia communities that our zoning density would be changing and that they would be able to bring forward a architectural rendering and an application for 10 units per acre. Again, well before the draft was released to the public.
I don't believe there's anybody that could tell them that their zoning was going to be changing. They could have been told that there will be a proposal to change our zoning, but, nobody can guarantee that a zoning change is going to take. No one person can guarantee that a zoning change is going to take place.
Well, again, the whole process has been muddied by GICH. Because GICH embarked on an endeavor of non-advertised meetings, no public involvement except for those by invitation. 2 years ago at a special called meeting, I red flagged you on this. GICH could have fixed this from the start by simply having advertised meetings and public participation. It was GICH that refused. You have 2 GICH members sitting on this board. They hold a majority.
But you're still asking this board to address situations from GICH, even though they're, I'm not sure they're still GICH members, but even if they were, there's GICH and there's the Board of Commissioners. GICH can't change ordinances or do any of our stuff. We can't do anything for them. If you've got a complaint about GICH, you really need to go to GICH.
But you're acting on what has been the GICH agenda tonight and planning and
Well, we're not
zoning
acting on it because it's the GICH agenda.
Letter to the editor from 2 years ago in Times Courier. Appearances of conflicts of interest are created when we have elected and administrative officials sitting on a GICH committee helping formulate policies or projects that these elected and administrative officials will later be expected to pass judgment on.
Can I ask you who the author of that letter
That
is?
author was standing right before you speaking tonight. And it's happening just like I saw would be happening. And again, I think it's this ill-conceived. I think we deserve to know how much of this is GICH, how much was it GICH that gave Georgia communities a heads up to move ahead? Are we here tonight on a rush timetable where a county commission meeting has been moved to accommodate the time schedule so that Georgia communities presumably will have the official approvals needed to make its application to the Georgia Department of Community Affairs next month?
Doug, no meeting has been moved in order to meet any
We're on
of
Friday
their.
night, so
Yeah.
the
The meeting tonight was moved because one of the folks here had a conflict, it had nothing to do with that. We move meetings all the time. If you look at our schedule, you're gonna find that, there are other meetings that are moved because they conflict with, for instance, HCCG scheduled meetings and other things. We try to meet every second Thursday, but other organizations and other things happen that one or more of us maybe can't make a meeting.
I
And
understand that.
so typically what we'll do is, we'll go ahead and change the date of the meeting.
Is this a position of this board that a Friday afternoon at 4 o'clock is the most advantageous time for a public hearing to draw maximum public input?
It is position of this board that Friday night at 4 PM was the earliest and the best that all of the people on this board could get together at the same time.
And again, my question is, why are we pushing for the earliest and not the best? And with that, I thank you.
Okay, thank you. Whoa. We're not gonna do this back and forth. You're welcome to come back.
Well, it's either GICH or it's not GICH.
Well, she's
Because
trying
if
to
it's GICH,
explain,
she's got
you better
bigger
finish.
problems.
Okay, but we're not gonna start going all over the room.
All right.
Happy
My
to-
apologies. So
Again, if you have a problem
Couple
with
of
GICH,
clarifications.
Department of Community Affairs is where you need to go.
I'd like to make a couple of clarifications. The December 2024 meeting, Ms. Ferguson spoke that was supposed to have been a presentation by the Georgia.
We are not appointed, we are not all elected
Y'all are
officials or
appointed.
stakeholders.
Okay, folks.
We can go round and round. but
We can, but we want to talk about the subject at hand, and GICH